Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to EWTS 2020. I'm Sam Murley with PTC, and will be our moderator today for our panel. The topic of conversation today is remote assistance and guided work instruction. To tee up, today, companies and customers are faced with a level of unprecedented challenges, from travel bans to lockdowns and social distancing. The need to rapidly reskill and train the workforce, compete against the competition, and ensure work is completed with the highest levels of health and safety. It's forcing companies to find new ways of working while ensuring business continuity. Some have called it the new normal or the Great Reset. Recently, it's been touted as the Great Acceleration. And augmented reality is important more now than it ever has been. Case studies suggest that AR can dramatically reduce worker training time by up to 90%, increase worker productivity by 30 to 50%, and reduce human error by 60 to 90%. The one thing we know for sure is that on a daily basis, the future is changing. And AR is a business-ready technology whose time has come. And what augmented reality means for organizations and the workforce around the world, how it's helping organizations respond, recover, and thrive, that's our topic today. So we have with us four terrific expert and amazing panelists to talk to us about these areas, and each bring a perspective and a wealth of knowledge around implementing and deploying AR to drive real business impact. We plan to touch on how each of these experts is navigating and accelerating deployment within their organization, dive into the measurable results and business impacts guided AR work instruction and expert remote assistance is producing. And then we'll end it with a few stories from the front line. So let's jump right in. Without further ado, we'd like to do some introductions. And Renita, how about you kick us off?
Hi, my name is Renita Whitfield. I am the program manager for our Tech Live Look program at Porsche Cars North America.
Awesome. Great to have you. Randy, you want to go next?
Hello, I'm Randy Nunez, and I am the tech trend lead for the extended reality team at Ford Motor Company, and we investigate all technologies that are augmented, virtual, and mixed reality and try to find out how they can be used at Ford effectively.
Great to have you as well, Randy. Brian, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'm Brian Scanlon. I'm a lead architect at Travelers, and I'm working on our Murley technology department in our research and development team.
Okay, great. And then last but not least, Chad from Accenture.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. Chad Modad. I am the Chief Technology Officer and Associate Director of our Houston Innovation Hub, where we focus on emerging technologies such as XR. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you. All right, so we got intros out of the way. Let's dive into that first part of the panel, right? We're really wanting to explore how these individuals and their organizations are driving adoption and making AR a key business differentiator. And really, how should an organization think about where to start first with AR? And Renita, can you kick us off a little bit with some background on Tech Live Look, and how the idea came to fruition at Porsche?
Absolutely. So in 2017, our former innovation manager took our manager of technical support to a wearables conference in Atlanta, Georgia. So at that wearables conference, our manager of technical support, Doug House, had the opportunity to put on a pair of AR glasses. What was game changer for him is that he saw a document being sent through the glasses and was immediately in his purview. So from that, he thought this would be a really interesting tool that we could look into implementing into our service areas of our dealerships. So after that, they came back to our headquarters at PCNA and did a lot of research with the technical support team to see how this tool could be used to enhance the work that they already do. One of the technical support specialists actually said, the hardest part of my job is not being able to see what the technician is talking about. So if there's an issue, that technical support specialist can't actually see what the issue is, but they're reliant on them describing what the issue is or taking pictures and not seeing what that issue is real time. So right there, we noticed at that moment that we could use this wearables technology and this AR technology to help assist with the communication gap. And from that, we started a pilot program to see how wearables and AR technology could solve that problem.
Interesting story. I think as we were kind of coming into the panel, we were talking about that story. I think it's advantageous, and maybe for folks in the audience, right, at different stages of the deployment journey, to think about that pivot and persevere moment. Maybe when you think it's a great fit for one thing, to continue to do some exploratory, because AR, an organization can do so much with AR. It's really what should you focus on first? And I think we're hearing some of that from your story there, which is great. Randy, you had an interesting perspective on this as well. We're about to dive into this topic a little bit, but do you want to jump in and add anything? And specifically, I think, Randy, listening to you talk about how to get people to buy in and commit, Renita was taking us through that kind of idea into fruition and then into action. What's the other part of that sometimes, and what do you see at Ford in terms of getting others to come in, understand, but then really take hold of an AR initiative? Can you share some insights into that?
Well, I think one of the things that have been very important for us is being able to find those enablers, those people who have influence. And I use the term disruptors also, because they're very disruptive to the existing environment. But you need to find those people that have influence, that are willing to break down the barriers. So one example is we had an assistant plant manager that was interested in understanding how AR technology and smart eyewear could reduce the training time for the plant staff. And so went in, did a demonstration of the technology, and it was very compelling for them. So he got me connected up with the hourly trainers, and then we started working together on sharing information. I shared about AR and some of the guided instructions capabilities. He was sharing about what the work environment is like, what people are looking for. He had a very good rapport with the union leadership as well as the plant floor personnel. And then we found an operator that was just very accommodating, willing to work with us and work around schedules and things like that. Very important as we learn together. So I learned more and more about their operations. They learned more and more about the technology. And together, it was very much a win-win.
Okay. Yeah, great perspective. Chad, you wanna add to your insights here? I mean, imagine you get to work with customers and organizations all the time and have to maybe think about both sides of the equation, right? To Renita's kind of how her program came to fruition, and going through those different steps or stages, and then Randy's given a great perspective on learning together, kind of that partnership approach. Curious if you have any insights, again, from just probably all the engagements that maybe you have in discussions with different types of organizations and industry.
Yeah, happy to share. I think I'll highlight it by kind of talking about some of the key elements in Randy's experience and story there. I think that the first one that you heard was this kind of sensitivity for making sure that what we're putting in place with the technology is actually going to be effective and is going to be welcome. I've found from my experience, the closer you get to kind of the field, the front line, the more suspicious people tend to be of technology that looks and feels like Big Brother. And so we want to be really sensitive to that. And so finding someone that is open, finding someone that's going to be comfortable using the technology and without all of the kind of the suspicion is a starting point. And the fact that he's looking for people that are disruptors and enablers, right? It kind of starts it from a kind of a bottom-up perspective. And so then what it creates is a pull of the technology as opposed to a push from the organization. And so that's kind of the second element as well. And then the last is continuing to work with the end user, right? The human involved here. We're collecting voice of the customer, right? In this case, the voice of the employee along the way, and then they now have a part in making this technology viable, institutionalizing it, and getting it adopted. And so those are kind of the key elements that we tend to talk about, whether it's this technology or something else. Those are all the same elements, and those are the things that I liked in Randy's story there.
Yeah, I think we've captured, you know, three quick things. That last one, end user, voice of the customer, right? Thinking through kind of the lens of their day to day or life in the day of, focusing on business problems, right? And pivoting to focus on the things that actually matter. And then that ops plus tech partnership and kind of learning together along the way. What's this new capability? What are you talking about, Randy? And Randy, you're going, well, where can we plug it in? Where is it going to have the most impact? And this is so it's kind of weaving together here in an interesting way. And I think there's that fourth piece, right? And Ryan, I think this is a good way to kick it over to you. You know, no matter where the organization is at in the adoption of AR, we're hearing that all these things are woven in, and sometimes they're front and center, and sometimes they're kind of there and supporting. But if we take a step back and come at it from another angle, you know, you're on the bleeding edge at Travelers with AR and XR, helping the organization kind of discover and prioritize, and you and the team are acting as pathfinders. So can you give a perspective there and kind of come in and share a little bit of insights on how you go about that?
Sure, yeah. So we're an R&D group. So we like to get our hands dirty and play with the latest and greatest stuff and kind of imagine what we can do with it. But it's important to remember that, you know, the decision to go to production ultimately is up to the business. It's not up to us. But I can offer a few tips that might increase the chances of adoption for you. In general, you know, you want to get people who are passionate about the solution, about AR, who can explore the technical capabilities first, and then go ahead and, you know, they get to use some of their basic business knowledge of your business and build a demo for a very specific domain, right? Like pick something small, like in our case, claims. You know, just in general, I know a bit about claims. I can build a little bit of a demo here that can show some things I know they do. But mainly, you're highlighting the technical capabilities that device can do, like with AR, whether you're dealing with, you know, if you're dealing with eye tracking or hand capture, that sort of thing. Really show off those neat things that people don't know about. And then next, you want to kind of go find a leader in that business domain, preferably someone who's never seen this stuff before, and show them your demo and encourage them to get their creative juices flowing, right? You know, show them what it can do, ask them about how it can solve some real world tech problems, right? And then hopefully they'll become your business champion. And at that point, we like to collaborate with them to try to make a polished proof of concept that in the end will solve a real world need that they're looking for. And if you do that, if you pull that off, now you have a successful showcase product. And you can use that to energize executives in your industry, in your business. So hopefully your showcase will be able to demonstrate your technical capabilities, but also delivers real business value. So then at that point, you want to work with your business champion. They're hopefully going to sponsor a pilot program for you. And once that gets kicked off and running, you can start iterating on that pilot over and over again to work at the pain points. And, you know, knowing this is bleeding edge stuff, it's usually not painless. So there's going to be bumps and bruises and cuts along the way that you're going to have to learn from. And ultimately, hopefully, you have a successful pilot. But regardless of the outcome, you know, you're going to gather and document the learnings that can be applied to future pilots in any domain, right? You're going to learn all the different things that you learned about how AR is, you know, changes the user experience. And for the next time around, regardless of what the domain is, you'll have that in hand to build a product that can get to adoption.
Curious if you could go into one aspect of that process, and I get the sense maybe when you go in and you pitch out a program, pitch out an idea, in my head I'm going, man, is this like a Shark Tank experience, or what? What are the key things that you hit on? Is there for someone in you know, your position at another organization, right, who's trying to make it real, connect it back to value, capabilities, kind of bring that full story? Are there some specific things that to go into a session with executives, right, that you typically hit on, or any additional best practices there? I mean, anything from keep it to 20 minutes to go in with a partner and pitch and co-pitch some of that. Just curious on any insights you have there.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, getting that business champion is key, right? You want to get the person who's the expert in that particular domain, and that person knows the ins and outs and where the bottom line is and what's going to be most effective, for the company to deliver this thing forward. And then, as a tech person, you can kind of just wow them with what it can do. We kind of, AR has such a capability to blow people's minds that, like, you want to really make it sparkle and shine, while also driving home that business value you're going to reap from this.
Okay. And Renita, curious if maybe in that transition point with Tech Live Look, and as it changed, was there any of that type of engagement? Did you have to bring folks along the way, or do any kind of internal pitching to maybe re-articulate what this program was going to do versus maybe what it was first intended to do?
Absolutely. So during the pilot program, we piloted with different types of dealers. So smaller dealers, larger dealers, dealers in metropolitan cities, dealers that were in smaller cities. During that pilot program, though, we also were trying to get the technicians familiar. Like Chad mentioned, when you bring this kind of technology into a dealership, at first they're thinking of that big brother mentality. So it took some time to explain to them, how this could be helpful to them. So in a certain situation, during our pilot program, we had a ticket come into our technical support team about the door handle. Well, the technician was calling the door handle something very different than what the technical support specialist was understanding it to be. So that miscommunication caused tickets to go back and forth multiple times between them. Once they utilized Tech Live Look and they utilized the glasses, then the technical support specialist was able to see what the technician was talking about. And from that moment, it's stories like that kept on building within our program, which then kept on being communicated throughout our dealerships. We then had service managers that were huge champions of the program as well. And that definitely helped us with adoption. Also, when COVID occurred, and we were limited on traveling to the dealerships and just traveling as a whole, the technicians could then see how they could use this technology and still connect with technical support or still connect with their field technical managers. So those, just the stories, and then actually the technicians using the technology really did help us with the adoption.
Okay. All right. So it's a little bit about winning over hearts and winning over minds along the way with some different personas within the organization. And Chad, would like to come back to you and see if you can jump in here and again go into some more detail on their perspective, and even a double click into what you mentioned, I think earlier, best practices around a holistic, call it adoption strategy or deployment strategy for augmented and mixed reality. Would love for you to take us into some more details there.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, I think, most of these technologies, what we've seen is that they wind up in our clients' innovation labs, innovation hubs, right? Technology arms. And those teams are phenomenal at pulling the technology together, figuring out how it works, figuring out how it integrates, and then kind of sometimes just throwing it over the wall. Right. And so that technology work still needs to be done. But the perspective that we take is there's work on the front end of that and on the back end of that also has to happen. Right. And so with the work that is on the front end is what we typically call service design. Right? And this is your kind of standard design thinking type mindset that you're taking to the problem. You're incorporating the end users, you're incorporating the business. Right. We're trying to understand what who the personas are that are going to be impacted by this technology, right? It's not just the people in the front line, but it's also people that have to support them on the back end in the case of, say, remote expert, right? So what is their experience like today? What are we going to try to optimize for? We can do the technology project, but then we need to make sure that we also do good business change management on the back end of it which is training and internal marketing and communications, right? Again, we need to let the organization know this technology is coming, why we've deployed the technology, who's going to be impacted, how the world is going to be better and different, and why we needed to do that now. And so those are all the kind of the bits and pieces that help that kind of end state adoption. Otherwise, I think, I've been coming to wearables conferences and technology conferences for years, and the word pilot purgatory still exists. So otherwise we get stuck in pilot purgatory, and then we can't ever institutionalize the technology. So that's kind of that front to back of service design, technology project, getting that part done, internal marketing communications, and then the business change management piece. That's the process that we follow. That's the playbook.
Okay, that's quite that's a great playbook. There's so many bits and pieces there that could warrant, its own 45-minute deep dive session. That's a great collection and correlation. And Ryan, curious on Chad mentioned the term, pilot purgatory, kind of bridging the early adoption, late adoption gap. I'm curious how I would have to imagine that. Maybe not every program is 100% success through kind of the Pathfinder program that you run, but what does that mean when you sense maybe something isn't clicking as it should or isn't connecting to something really important? How do you go about thinking about that as travelers as part of really the funnel of innovation at the company?
Sure. Yeah. So obviously you have to evaluate it and figure out what's gone wrong, kind of take it apart. And at that point, you got to go back to your business champion and figure out, what isn't working, what value isn't delivering here, and iterate, tweak it, and make sure it delivers on that value that they need, so that you, in the end of the day, you can get that adoption that you're looking for.
Yeah. So Sam, just to put a fine point on what Ryan said there, right? I think that if we take the time to do that work up front, define what success looks like in that design thinking service design process, then we are more likely to be successful at the end and not have to go back and tweak, because we will have established that up front.
Yeah, it's kind of de-risking the rest of the program itself. If you really spend that core time digging in, finding the right people, making the right pivots, bringing the right folks along the way, and that playbook. It's like we've got a pretty interesting collective on the insights of what that playbook looks like. So, so let's go ahead, jump in.
I was going to say, and kind of one more key point there, right? I think that we find that those implementing the technology tend to want to skimp on that front end piece and think about it as a cost. But the other thing that we also find in that process is the problems, the kind of the hypothesis of what we were trying to solve changes throughout that process. And so you think about it as an option that you're buying on making sure that you're doing the right work up front before you actually start doing it, and then get to the end, you're like, well, that didn't work out. Let's start over.
Yeah, yep, and maybe that trade-off between, okay, you mentioned kind of the cost, right, the return on investment discussion, mm-hmm. and do you get yourself stuck in a pilot, right, by not maybe having the ability to impact something more broadly, and vice versa? What are the things to watch for if you implement from a broad scope right away, and some of that, I think, taking that into account. Obviously, the return on investment is a huge piece into that. So with the topic of ROI is kind of that maybe the next place we go with the panel in terms of discussing some of the results that AR is producing, when in use within your organizations, when in use within industry, of course. And Renita, you mentioned something earlier, and I put an asterisk next to it, COVID, the pandemic, and enabling business continuity internally for organizations as well as for its customers, being top of mind for you and other leaders today, reducing resolution time, improving remote assistance, all of that, and really, again, focused on how can AR create and sustain business and business value. So I'd like to kick it over to you to see if you could take us through how you guys are thinking about that. Again, how does that tie into the program already in place, or maybe what you're thinking about in the future in terms of additional types of expansions with the capability?
So during our pilot program, we saw a reduction of about 40% in resolution time of the tickets that were using the Tech Live Look technology. We started implementation in May of 2018, and since then we've seen 40%, probably a little bit even more than that, of the same reduction time. So that means that, you know, a vehicle is getting the issue solved faster, is getting to the customer faster. So we have a lot of benefits there and return of investment there. As far as expansion is concerned, we're just looking at different ways. So we're talking to our end users, we're talking to the technicians to determine other helpful ways that this technology can maybe reduce a step for them or reduce time. Is it taking pictures within the glasses and then having it connect to the ticketing system? Is it connecting a boroscope device to the glasses via Bluetooth so that they can use that in that camera as well, so that the technical support team can see that? So we're really speaking to our technicians here to figure out what would be useful to them, and then also looking at other places within the organization that might have a problem that they need to solve that remote assist could help.
Got it. Okay. And Randy, you, we were prepping for the panel, and we were talking about this topic, and you were right. We're talking about field work a little bit with Renita, and you were talking about on the manufacturing side and some, you know, areas of fast or rapid implementation, maybe at Ford, or just a perspective on that. Anything to share, Randy, from your side in terms of the pandemic and maybe how AR is looked at a little bit differently?
Yeah, so obviously with COVID-19 and travel restrictions, remote support became the norm rather than optional. And there were, much like Porsche, we have dealers and we also have suppliers. Both have technical support teams, and both have people that travel a lot. And specifically the supplier side, we had been trying out this technology, experimenting with where it might work and things like that. And with COVID, that team was just shut down completely. So it actually accelerated their activities in the smart eyewear approach. So it was actually, in this case, an accelerator to move faster in this area. This could have gone on for another multiple months had COVID not popped up. But with this extreme travel restriction, they really needed something to make them feel like they were actually physically there. And I'm always grilling my customer, why can't you do it with what you have today? Why doesn't this work? And that's where I get my best user stories, because they say, well, I can't put my phone up in there because I'm there, or I need to be able to work. I need to be able to move things out of the way while we're talking. So, and then we'll take some videos and examples of what people have used it for. So in this case, COVID-19 actually accelerated the business in order to move into this area faster than originally planned.
Okay. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. I mean, even at PTC, but just obviously a lot of the things that are being shared around, you know, AR, but other capabilities in terms of being used now for remote support or remote assistance to continue to connect organizations with customers. And you mentioned something there too, where you're saying, well, you know, can I do this with video? Can I do this by clicking a picture and sending it in? And sure, you could, but you know, AR is about the best replication of, you know, Renita being the expert, and I'm halfway around the world, and I need help, and she can't get there, or she can't get there in time, and it's the best replication of having her with me to help show me how to fix something, repair something, you know, do something in a more safe manner. So it is. I think it's a trend we're seeing, and it's the question of, well, why would we? Now it's, well, why wouldn't we with AR? And very quickly coming to the forefront as being a very, very easy decision to make in terms of, should we try it, should we not, should we deploy, should we not? And I think on the topic of the front lines and something that Renita, you hit on in terms of time. How can we reduce time? And you all were chatting about this quite a bit coming into the panel, and time, being the currency that transcends industries. And AR has been proven time and time again to generate and save time, production time, service time, training time. And Ryan, you were really honing in on this in terms of claims and inspection in the field. So blending that time and kind of work going on in the field. Can you talk a little bit about this, maybe tied to some of your programs, but specifically, how are you thinking about time generation and savings from a end user perspective?
Sure, of course. Yeah, at Travelers, we're always looking to increase our efficiency so that we can better serve our customers. Obviously, less time spent on tedious processes is going to yield more time to devote to our customers. So, for example, there's certain tasks that our field adjusters are responsible for that are very tedious and very time consuming out in the field. And, looking forward, we kind of envision adjusters being able to go out to the field with the mixed reality headset on that can automate a lot of that work. The sensors and the AI that's on board these headsets, they can allow adjusters to just glance around an area and quickly and easily identify and capture details that they otherwise would be manually entering into laptops or a mobile phone. For example, there's certain cases where they're gonna have their phone out, snapping a lot of photos of what's going on, going back and labeling what that is, and then potentially linking all that into a spreadsheet. And with mixed reality device, you can just kind of look around and have it take photos as needed and have it identify things using AI as needed and export it all seamlessly. So, a job that might have taken you all day long could be a couple hours on a site. But time isn't just about the day-to-day. It's also about the time it takes to become good at your job, right? AR gives us the ability to create much higher quality training and brings much more frequent opportunities to train our team up. For example, if you're using an MR headset, all day during your job, then you do have the potential to review that data later on that was captured, either with your team or with superiors or with training people, to find areas for improvement where you can do things more quickly or more accurately going forward.
Yeah, it's a great perspective on. I think something that you're honing in on is the combination of AR plus, AR plus IoT, AR plus existing systems, AR plus spatial data. AR for sure is providing an impact on its own, but adding the plus to that, or the plus before that, CAD plus AR plus IoT. I'm getting some of that from you right now in terms of what's maybe the best recipe or ingredients for a successful deployment and integration of different data and different maybe information that's captured in real time. And Chad, would love for you to jump in here on not only the aspect of time reduction and maybe things that Accenture is seeing or tracking, but also maybe hit on that, and then this other piece of AR that seems to be coming through now very quickly as well is how companies are positioning themselves with AR to compete differently, to compete to win within their market. Maybe you can take us through your view on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So time for sure, right? But I think the other thing that you gave an example of, Sam, was if Renita didn't have to travel, for example, as your expert to where you are, right? So the most immediate intangible outcome that we've seen is travel budgets have just gone down, right? The experts aren't having to get out onto a plane, travel halfway around the world or all the way around the world, and so that's an impact directly to the bottom line. The other thing that happens is that because we've saved time for the experts, right? It means that they can have a bigger reach and a bigger impact, be a bigger force multiplier, because they can handle more of the requests that they would get, whereas they would otherwise be unavailable, traveling, right? And solving one problem for a small amount of time and then traveling back. That time window opens up. And so the organization can handle more volume, right? And if what we're talking about is that volume being direct impacts on customers, right? Kind of coming back to your second part of your question there, is that if like in one of the examples that we've worked with, customer churn is related directly to the quality of customer service, and customer service is impacted because resolution times are too long. And I can shrink all of that. I can actually start to impact and reduce customer churn, therefore not having to go acquire brand new customers just to keep my same revenues, right? And so this technology, we have a really strong use case where the problem started with a churn problem and ultimately ended with a deployment of some AR technologies that got remote expert capabilities in, captured knowledge, and to Ryan's point, made people better at their job faster. So that was another time element. And so that then ratchets up the quality of the people out in the field doing customer service and servicing the equipment. And so it has these compounding effects. It's not something that happens immediately, it happens over time, and as an organization matures with the technology.
Yeah, the generation of more time to then go do more. You kind of go, how do you cash this out, right? How do I cash the value out? Okay, it's a reduction in truck rolls. Now we've got more capacity to do more. We can take on more work. And then there's that maybe third piece coming back to you, Renita, on we're creating something no one's created before, and we're developing something new and acting. It's acting as a competitive differentiator in industry. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe how Porsche is viewing the program itself that you're leading as a differentiator, and any other additional thoughts or guidance as other folks in the audience are thinking about, sure, how can I do this for internal value, but how can I take this to my customers and provide something unique?
So at Porsche, the biggest thing that we did with Tech Live Look is we identified what that problem was, and we use this technology to solve that problem. So we identified that there was a communication gap, and then we were able to solve that. So going forward with this type of technology, we would love to see, how we could broaden this spectrum and use this technology in other areas to hopefully then provide like same or better results than we have with the Tech Live Look program. For us with Tech Live Look, we're really happy with the adoption that we've seen of it. Again, like Randy stated, the utilization of Tech Live Look tripled during the COVID times, and that allowed us to, like Randy said, it forced people to use this tool because that's what was there for them. So as a competitive differentiator, Porsche was the first automotive industry to use Tech Live Look and this type of technology for remote assist in our dealerships. From that, we've seen BMW has picked up the utilization of this technology, and some other companies as well. So it was great to be kind of the initiator of using this technology within the field in this way for remote assist and being the pioneers of that.
So some early adopter, kind of first in advantage. Okay, and Randy, coming back to you to round this out a little bit. We're talking about competitive differentiation, new business models, generating capacity, but going back to like the bread and butter of AR and training, right? Training quickly emerged as the forefront use case and sweet spot for AR. And the real transformation is when AR happens at the point of work and in context versus maybe 180 hours of classroom, in a seat training or even shadow training. Randy, curious on your perspective on this. You've been thinking through this for a long time now, how Ford is approaching both operations and trainings, and even Ford's kind of projected outcome in terms of, we think it's going to have this type of impact. We really think AR is gonna operationalize training per se at the point of work or reduce it in this way. How are you thinking about that?
So in a plant environment, a lot of the training is done by what I would call shadowing, or they take someone who's a subject matter expert and they take someone who is not familiar with it through the operational process. And one thing you'll find is that you might be an excellent SME operator, but maybe you're not such a good trainer. So what we did is we took an SME and actually used the technology to help us create training, because the training was in people's heads and in paper books still in these days. We used the technology, smart eyewear, to record the SME doing the job, and they would put their verbal comments in, and then the trainer and I sat down and we sort of edited it down, put it in discrete steps, step-by-step instructions with photos and sometimes videos, things like that. And then we took some folks that were in the assembly area and brought them into machining. So assembly is your typical, we put the same parts in over and over again, but machining is typically a higher level skill, because you have to know when the machining parts need to be changed. You have to check specs constantly. And so it's a much more challenging job. So we took operators and less experienced operators, and using this technology, put them in the machining environment. And where it normally takes people about 7 weeks to get up to speed, we were able to do it in hours. So
Wow.
when you look at those kinds of impact, it makes you, it really gives you an idea of what this technology is capable of doing. And the tools that we now have, both in the hardware and software, get us to that point. You might not have been able to say that a few years ago, but I think you can say that with certainty now.
That is a almost, yeah, it's almost unbelievable, but it's not. I mean, you're right, that weeks down to a fraction of that, and doing it at the point of work is super impressive. And Ryan, I want to come back to you. We were talking a lot about training. Has Travelers seen anything, or in terms of kind of business results or even expected outcomes when it comes to training? You mentioned these new capabilities in the field, right, and providing AR and mixed reality apps to the frontline worker. What about training? Is that part of the equation and what you all are focused on?
Yeah, for sure. Travelers has this great facility where we have a warehouse, and inside the warehouse is full-size houses and other buildings that are in various states of disrepair, floods, fires, and whatnot, that we use to help train our claims adjusters on. And so we first started considering training with AR. We thought of some great ways that we could augment the reality of those areas to provide some better training. But then as mentioned before, COVID came, right? And so in the middle of this exploration we were doing, we realized we couldn't go to Plain University anymore, and people wouldn't be able to go there either. So we really started shifting our focus on delivering training remotely, right? And first, it's a great opportunity to bring people together anytime we're all separated, but it's really kind of got us thinking creatively about how we can virtualize some of our traditional in-training classes and make them happen remotely, right? In a case where, the subject matter expert is at their home, and they may not have the certain equipment or setup that you would have at a training facility. Could we provide like a digital twin version of that that is virtual, that they could disassemble and play with right there, and you can have your entire training class tune in via a Zoom or something like that to really let people feel like they're in the room and seeing that object that the person's training on.
Yeah, so digitizing that experience.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great, I think, blended training story. Ryan, Randy, how to think about training, how to where the sweet spot really is for training with AR today versus maybe training for AR 3 years ago. So great perspectives. I'd like to help us wrap up here. I mean, this was an amazing, I think an amazing group, collective, individual, professional perspectives. We've got this, a playbook, if you will, best practices, actual impacts when AR is in use, winning the hearts and minds, and navigating organizations' maturity and approach to accelerating adoption, and of course, how to enable business continuity during times of volatility. So as we wrap up today, I'd like to ask each panelist to give their 3 words, AR and FY20, give their 3 words in AR, FY21, and then we'll go ahead and close it out. And Renita, I'm going to kick it over to you.
3 words. I have a lot more than 3 words. I would say Tech Live Look, because that's our program. But I would say adapt, investigate, and implement.
I like the FY23. That's good. That's great. Brian, what about you?
3 words, maybe envision the future, right? This is where we're going. And this is, it's not a jetpack, but it's pretty close to it. It's kind of the hologram show I've been looking for, and I think it's going to change things a lot.
Envision the future. Okay. Randy.
Tipping point now, or tipping point arrived. I've been going to this conference a long time, seeing a lot of good product and a lot of good use cases, but I think we have reached a point where we're moving out of that pilot purgatory into real production and implementing products and services that have real value.
Yep. Okay. And last but not least, Chad.
Sure. I'm going to kind of try to sum up FY20 with the 3 words around AR, which I always thought of was, again, also having been to the shows, the 3-word summary is, what is this? All right. And that was kind of the feeling around AR about FY20. And so now FY21, right, or calendar year 21 is really more the 3 words I think that I see are, right, it's either one of these 2, right? This could work, or we need this, right? And so those would be the 3 words that I would sum up FY21 with.
That's great. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Renita, Ryan, Randy, and Chad. Thank you very much for being a part of the panel today. I have no doubt it was worthwhile for attendees, watching and being a part of EWTS. So to the attendees, thanks for joining. Enjoy the rest of EWTS 2020. Link up with each of these panelists. You can find them on LinkedIn. I'm sure they would love to continue the conversation. And post your questions in the chat. Join us and meet us there next in the live QA session, and we'll close this down and see you there.